На мне была мобилизация.
I was part of the mobilization. I was part of the war. The leadership issues criminal orders. As far as I recall, someone dismembered a young girl. I had a security clearance. The FSB might check us, but they simply don't have the resources to verify everyone. He screamed, "I'll kill as many Ukrainians as possible. I'll go there, and I'll kill them." The border guards literally showed me on Google Maps which checkpoint I needed to pass through. It's not such a big deal compared to, say, losing a limb. You have to understand that at any moment, they can grab you and send you off like cannon fodder. In 2017, I was sent to serve in Khabarovsk. I served 6 months of mandatory service there and then signed a contract in Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. They assigned me the position of a mobilization officer, which is someone who handles all matters related to mobilization. In other words, I was responsible for rounding up men into the army. I was responsible for the war, to put it bluntly. Honestly, I thought it was the most useless role in the entire brigade. I mean, what war? What battles are we talking about? Especially on the island of Sakhalin. Having served for 6 years, I had a clear understanding of the state of affairs in the army. When all you do is submit photo reports every month, that's not an army. It's just pictures. I'll give you an example. I once had to clean up the road in winter just because someone thought it looked dirty. We even shoveled out puddles because, apparently, puddles look bad in official photos. And frankly, everyone did this sort of stuff. That's how the entire army operates. It's all just one big photo report from Moscow.
Вооруженные силы России по поручению Верховного Главнокомандующего приступили к специальной военной операции по защите ДНР и ЛНР.
В начале марта, я не помню точно, 3 или 5.
In early March, I don't remember if it was the 3rd or the 5th, we started sending out the first troops. We have BTGs in our unit. BTGs are battalion tactical groups. There were several battalions, each of about 1,000 people. The first armored carrier rolled out on March 3rd. From the very start of the war, people started leaving for the front. First, just a few, but when it became clear after a month that this wasn't going to be over in 3 days, our unit started to empty out. Over time, it felt like a ghost town. You walked around and saw no one.
Буквально вот первые числа марта.
By late February and early March, I started receiving news about people being killed. Not news, per se, I mean report forms. Based on these reports, I would write up summaries for the military commissariat, detailing where and under what circumstances someone died. And those were only the ones we could identify. Most of the casualties were reported as missing in action, but missing usually means dead. 99% dead, and maybe 1% hiding. But they'll likely die or be captured soon. When Russian media started reporting that there were only 5 or 50 casualties overall, in just our unit in the Far East, we had over 10 to 20 deaths. And that was just the ones we managed to ID. The leadership issues criminal orders, I can say that, with a clear conscience. They decide whose deaths to record and whose not to. Many families still don't know their loved ones have died, even though it's now the 3rd year since the war began. Even the Ministry of Defense doesn't have a complete casualty list. I'm not speculating. I'm certain of this because it all starts at the local level. Commanders avoid reporting shortages because they get punished for it, but they can't conjure new soldiers out of thin air. So they lie. And all of it moves up the chain, higher and higher and higher. They tell me, don't write that. Naturally, I don't send it directly to Moscow. I send it to the higher command, in Khabarovsk or wherever. And Khabarovsk, I don't know, probably cuts something out as well and sends it further. In the end, something reaches Moscow saying, everything is great. We have hordes of cyborgs, and our soldiers are resurrecting from the dead. I am certain this is exactly how it works. And that's where these insane orders come from. To take Kharkiv, or who knows, even Poland. Everyone on the ground, commanders and soldiers fighting in Ukraine, perfectly understands that this is impossible. Higher command doesn't understand it. And this isn't just in my unit. It's the same across all units. The scale of this issue can be seen clearly when you compare the official casualty reports with the numbers uncovered by journalists. The difference is staggering. And you sit there and think, what is even happening? Are you people serious? This is a person, not an object, not a number. This is someone whose parents are waiting for them at home. And then the mother calls our unit's hotline and asks, "Where's my son? Where's my brother?" The person answering the phone, an ordinary conscript perhaps, checks the list and sees that the person is already dead. But instead of telling her the truth, he says, "Everything's fine. Call us back later. He's doing well. He's on duty, but currently out of contact." Every month, we ran exercises of sorts. We practiced scenarios as if mobilization had been declared. We had them each month, and they lasted a whole week. I gathered the administration of the recruitment office, and we trained together, simulating the arrival of mobilized personnel. I traveled to all the military commissariats in our region that supplied people to our unit. I coordinated with these officers, reviewing which people were assigned to us, those in reserve, so to speak. In case of a real war, real mobilization, I would act exactly as I had during the exercises. That's what I did. And then the war began. September 2022.
300 тысяч резервистов, которые будут призваны.
Кто проходил службу в рядах вооруженных сил, имеет определенные военно-учетные специальности и соответствующий опыт.
We were all simply led into the basement, en masse. This is the place where we usually receive people, and they told us to wait. They didn't tell us anything at all. I should have been informed if something like this was happening. But neither I, nor the officers, nor the brigade commander, no one was told anything about it. In the army, you can't just arrive somewhere and say, something is about to happen. There has to be an order. There must be documents. I'm supposed to send those documents because that's my responsibility. But, as you can understand, I didn't do that. So, we arrived, and then the mobilized men started piling in. Who are these people? What are their roles or specialties in the military? No one had any idea, and everyone just accepted it. That's it. It's like a snowball effect. Buses just kept coming from the military enlistment office, right? Random people. No one knew who they were or where they came from. When I personally talked to these people, I recorded their details for myself, just to at least have some idea who they were and where they came from. I asked almost every one of them, "How did you end up here? Where are you going? Why are you going?" I would say, "Do you know any of this yourself?" Because I don't. They would tell me things like, "I'm a truck driver. I was pulled over by the traffic cops who were with the military police. They pulled me out of the truck, handed me a notice, and said, 'You have 2 hours to get ready.' And that person was from the Kuril Islands, which means he still had to fly there on a plane. So he quickly went home. I don't know why or what was going through his head. Packed his things, said goodbye to his family, got on a plane, and came to us. That's what they all said to me. I was taken from somewhere and brought here, and so on."
Людей обманули фактически и забрали. Вот у меня сына забрали. Он, во-первых, болеет, ему не могли его. Он не служил в армии, не вообще и даже военной в школе не проходил ничего. Он автомат не видел с роду. И дело в том, что они сейчас говорят, что это рота добровольцев.
At the time, when I looked at these people, I could honestly say they were just a rabble. It was a nightmare. Us in the military, we're not particularly high-minded people, morally or culturally speaking. But when you see someone who's, I don't know, completely filthy, soaked halfway through, and absolutely everyone was drunk. So drunk, they didn't know where they were or what they were doing. And one question kept coming to my mind. How in the world is this supposed to work?
Я нихуя не понял. Это что за хуйня? Это тревожный чемоданчик.
I'm telling you, we even had someone try to kill us with a pen, just a regular pen. Some guy came in and said, "I lost my backpack. There were drugs in it. Find it." We told him to look for it himself. He left, came back 5 minutes later, grabbed a pen, and started trying to kill us with it. It's madness.
Приходит другой,
Then another guy, 18 years old, comes in and says, I'll kill as many Ukrainians as I can. I'll go there and kill them. And I'm just standing there, looking at him with these eyes, asking, why? I just don't get it. He's 18 years old. Where does he get such hatred? I don't understand. One of the guys standing near this bloodthirsty recruit said, I don't understand why we're going there. I don't want to fight. War is wrong. And then this bloodthirsty recruit says, I know who I'll kill first. And he points to that guy and says, him. I was just in shock. This is the kind of crowd we're dealing with. That's how it works. These are the kinds of people who show up.
Я должен был уехать в 10 часа, в 10 часов. А, короче, мест не хватило. Карифаны мои уехали. Вот я сейчас следом поеду.
А вот на самом деле...
Now, I actually want to address a widespread myth about mobilization, which says that the partial mobilization happened, it's over, and no one else will be mobilized. That's absolutely false. That's not how it works. Back then, there was just, let's say, a big wave. That's how it all started. There was a huge wave. When the war began, people started being mobilized, literally, within the first weeks. Mobilized recruits were already arriving. And when that wave of mobilization ended, nothing really changed. People kept coming in, just not as spontaneously and unexpectedly for those outfitting and dispatching them, you know? It became more of a steady stream, just in smaller numbers.
Эта работа продолжается по разным направлениям. Что называется, от пляжа до вокзала идет такой отлов.
Мобилизация, она идет и сейчас.
Mobilization is still ongoing. And over the course of 2023, they've drafted about as many people as they did during a few weeks in September 2022. And this process continues to this day.
Нам нужны только те, кто уверен в себе, что он хочет воевать. Ему это нравится, ему это нужно.
Но в 23-м году началась...
But in 2003, another scourge began, so to speak, a different plague. This time, it was convicts. They were drafted in exactly the same way as regular recruits. We had special officers responsible for gathering these convicts, but they were brought in as if they were regular, mobilized recruits. They went through the exact same process, and no one in the unit was told, this guy raped a little girl, or this guy stabbed his mother, or whatever else. These people walked around the unit, were outfitted, trained, and deployed. We had convicts starting from around February 23, but after the liquidation of the Wagner PMC leader, that is, after the summer of 23, the number of convicts increased. By the way, I remember one striking case. There was a convict who was involved in a high-profile case on the island of Sakhalin. As far as I remember, he dismembered a young woman. He went through our unit like any regular soldier and was sent to war. Moreover, these kinds of scoundrels somehow always manage to survive, come back, and get pardoned. That guy is already free. That's usually how it works.
Ждем вас на родину живыми, здоровыми, с победой.
As soon as the mobilization began, the number of death notifications didn't just increase. It's an understatement to even put it that way. There was just an incredible amount. So many of them. I'll say it again. There were so many of them because they started coming in 5 or 6 per day. And keep in mind, these are only the cases that, as I mentioned, were identified. That is, people whose deaths were confirmed. As for those missing in action, it's like multiplying 2 by 2, then by 4, and so on. It's literally like folding a piece of paper again and again. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Our brigade, at the start of the war, was made up of around 3,000 people. I mean combat-ready men who could be deployed, not women, not conscripts and the like. Based on the information I had when I left Russia, our brigade no longer existed. It just doesn't exist anymore. And all these people, all these bodies, had to be sent home somehow. It was necessary to notify their families, and so on. We also have, let's say, a circle of military personnel who deal directly with the relatives. The scariest thing is, I never once saw a relative truly shocked to learn that their loved one had died. Most of those who came in were, I don't know, calm as stone. They came just to file paperwork and collect the compensation money for the deceased. That always terrified me. the decision that I couldn't take this anymore and that I needed to leave. I made it after the war began, as strange as that may sound. On February 24th, the war began. By March 3rd, I had submitted 3 applications for foreign passports, for myself and my family. I submitted everything as it was. I said I was in the military and all that. Then a few weeks later, I got a call from someone at the Ministry of Internal Affairs, a woman who said, "Sorry, you're not eligible. You're a soldier, and you need a certificate from the FSB." At that moment, I fully understood that there was no chance of getting any FSB certificate. So I started trying to resign on my own. I stopped showing up for service. I was probably there for just 2 hours total. During that time, I focused exclusively on dealing with the deceased, preparing notifications, sending them to military enlistment offices, and then leaving again. In every possible way, I showed everyone that I was against the war. By September 2022, I realized that my resignation wasn't going to happen. When that decree or order, whatever it was issued by the president announcing partial mobilization, there was a clause saying that absolutely everyone serving couldn't resign, and their contracts were extended indefinitely.
Это люди, которые рискуют своим здоровьем и жизнью ради людей и детей Донбасса, ради России. Они все герои.
И вот этот шаг, вот этот, так скажем, пинок под зад, он мне дал...
This move, sort of a kick in the ass, made me understand that there were no more legal or normal ways to leave the army. The only way was to flee, to deceive them and leave the country. Essentially, for me, the Russian army, the Russian government, and, in fact, all state institutions lost their legitimacy after the war began. To me, they became an unlawful entity. By August 2023, I understood that I couldn't stay on the same side as these unlawful formations. At that point, I knew I had to act decisively. The most important document I needed turned out to be my foreign passport. It's the only thing you need to leave Russia. Since I had already applied for one in March 2022 and was rejected, I was convinced that the military enlistment office workers must have an application history for each person, with all their details logged. So, what did I do? As I mentioned, I decided to take a gamble. I called the same Ministry of Internal Affairs number that had contacted me back in March 2022 to find out who was working there. Maybe the employee had changed by then. I clearly remembered the voice of the woman who called me then. When I called, a man answered. That's when I realized I needed to submit my application right away. I immediately logged into the Gosuslugi portal and started crafting a 10-year backstory. I deliberately left out any mention of being in the military. I knew for certain that the Military Enlistment Office and the MVD, or even the Border Service, don't have a shared database. All the enlistment offices operate manually, so to speak. All records are handwritten. Registration cards, unit assignments, all their documents are maintained by hand. They do have computers, of course, but they can't exchange information electronically. I was going all in, fully aware of the consequences if this was exposed and what awaited me. By that point, I was ready to go to prison. If I had to choose between going to fight in Ukraine and going to prison, I would choose prison. So I sent in the application, and on the same day, I got confirmation that it was being processed. I had to wait a month. Now, I understand it was all nonsense. Anyone could do it. But back then, I was really worried. I boarded a flight out of Russia. Out of all the countries I could fly to, they either border Russia or are friendly with Russia, or have a limited duration for stays. In Europe, specifically France and Germany, these were the only countries that openly announced they would grant political asylum to Russian deserters, to those who refused to fight on the grounds of their conscience. That's when I realized I needed to get there. When I was already in Georgia, I started looking for ways to get to Europe. What did I do? I went to every possible consulate, embassy, and similar offices, explaining that I was a Russian soldier. I can't even count how many times I told my story, trying to convince them that I wasn't some bloodthirsty killer who was simply scared for his life. I stressed that I didn't want to fight from the very beginning, not because of fear, but because I was against the idea of attacking another country. The only country that agreed to try processing a humanitarian visa was France. In December 2023, I sent in an application, and 6 months later, in May 2023, it was rejected. What saved me most, at least morally, was the fact that I accidentally stumbled upon a video online, on YouTube, with barely 100 views. It showed someone from Serbia managing to walk to Croatia, and I realized that if it worked for them, I could try the same. And what did I do then? I left Georgia and bought a ticket to Bosnia, because I thought it seemed like a safer country. From Bosnia, I pretty much walked across the border into Croatia. When I got there, I was astonished to realize that for years, even before the war began, many people had been crossing that border, and most of them were Russian citizens with Russian passports. The majority were Chechens. I don't know their reasons or stories, but it's a long and well-established route. Bosnia helps these people, and Croatia accepts them and grants asylum. So I essentially joined them. It didn't matter if you were Chechen or not. The main thing was that you had a Russian passport, and you were let through without any issues. I flew to Sarajevo, bought a simple bus ticket, and with air conditioning, we rode for 8 hours to the border with Croatia. When we got there, I tried crossing through the checkpoint. If I'm not mistaken, it was Velika Kladuša. I hope I'm not wrong. That's the name of the Bosnian town bordering Croatia. I grabbed my suitcase, took my family, and we walked there. Cars were driving by, and we were essentially walking. I handed over 3 Russian passports to the Bosnian border guards. They examined them for a long time, turning them over in their hands. Finally, they stamped them, indicating that we had exited Bosnia, and handed them back to us, essentially saying, "Good job. Go on to Croatia. They'll accept you there." At that moment, a Croatian border guard approached and said, "Sorry, but this checkpoint has already processed a lot of people today. Go to another one." So, we started trying other checkpoints. We moved along the border, trying the first, second, and third checkpoints, looking for one where people were being let through. Some checkpoints close, so it's not like I can tell you a specific location that will definitely work. It might be closed, or another one might be open. The distances between them are only about 80 kilometers, so walking between them isn't an issue. In the end, I tried 3 checkpoints and was turned away only because other people had already crossed there earlier that day. How does it work? You need to arrive early, even at night, and attempt to cross. Border guards usually start processing people early in the morning, after shift changes or something similar. The Croatian border guards even used Google Maps to show me which checkpoint I could try next. They pointed out where I could go because they understood the situation and were genuinely helpful. I didn't expect that. As for bribes, I can say that I didn't pay a single penny to either the Croatian or Bosnian border guards. The only expenses were for food and accommodations, hotels and such. That's it. It seems clear to me that there's some kind of agreement in place. There's no way that people cross systematically every day without any questions being asked. The process is pretty simple. They take your passport, stamp it to indicate your exit, and then the Croatian border guards take your passport in silence. Absolute silence. They escort you to a room, quickly check your luggage, and then hand you over to the police. A special vehicle arrives, you get in with your belongings, and they take you to a police station. There, they process your documents, take your fingerprints, and begin the asylum application procedure. This is how it works. You request asylum, wait for them to complete all the formalities, and then they transfer you to a camp, or, in some cases, to a train station. Everything is processed in the police station, and once everything is in order, they transport you further by car. I was in Croatia for just 2 days. I bought a plane ticket to Germany, boarded the flight, and left. Once here, I officially submitted my asylum application. Just a few days ago, I had my first interview. During the interview, the official, as I understand, asked why I came here, what brought me here, and so on. You have to explain why you came to Germany and why you didn't, for example, stay in Croatia or elsewhere. It's a full interview. Based on this, as I understand, The German authorities will decide whether to let the person stay or send them back under the Dublin regulation. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I hope Germany agrees. If everything goes well and I'm granted legal status here, I'll get back to living a normal life. I don't have a grand dream of becoming a billionaire or anything like that. My dream, it might sound like it was influenced by the war or by something else, is simple. I just want to work, for my wife to work, for my child to go to kindergarten, to learn and grow. That's it. An incredibly simple dream. I want everything to be peaceful, with no wars, no killing, and so on. Since I served for 6 years, I fully understand that, whether one resents it or not, it's quite easy to end up in the army. People join who have poor education, who lack certain skills, or a profession, so to speak. For many of these people, life in another country will undoubtedly be very difficult, especially where you don't know the language. But first and foremost, this is a matter of life and death, and of your conscience. If you want to kill and die, bringing harm to the world, then, by all means, go to this war. But if you want to live and remain human, you will leave. There really isn't much of a choice.
The Insider's journalists continue their work despite pressure from Russian authorities. You can support them by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel. If you'd like to further support their efforts, consider making a donation by clicking the link in the description below.